potential for one of these teams to take that #1 seed, but it's not going to be an easy rough. We do have Seed of the Triumphant, really is Seed of the Triumphant this time around, since the two teams have already qualified to that global finals, but of course it's Seed of the Triumvirate. I've learned that lesson over this weekend. Fortified, Quaking, and Explosive going to be the three affixes, and of course that juicy number, a 24 key to kick us off.
And off we go in Seed of the Trumpet right now. Now, the most typical pull in here that we see is exactly what's happening right before our eyes, Jack. They're going to just group up, grab everything, AoE gripper it right on top of that boss, and just go as hard as they can. I'm expecting to see several tank deaths here, though.
Yeah, without a doubt, the Dark Withering just goes so hard here. It can be just absolutely lethal. And if they are getting to that situation where they do pop Purgatory because of how big the damage is, maybe they will just want to have their tank die. Maybe they will just want to be able to reset the Purgatory for future big pulls.
It's possible, and typically what happens here after killing the trash, they will oftentimes grab the boss and reset it, which gives them a bit of time in order to pull these extra little goos that we see on the side of the map. You know, I will say, actually, considering how insignificant they seem, they do a fair bit of damage as they apply that magic debuff dot on the tank that does stack. Want to make sure you dispel that. Wouldn't be shocked to see the DK kiting it just a bit after this CC. We're seeing the exact same mirror play from SunSky on the right side of the screen.
Yeah, but you're seeing there's quite a lethal dot that's going up on the tanks there, and just how easily it can stack up. So it's great to see out of Skyline D and out of Sun and Sky just mirroring each other, making sure that they are kiting out these little goos, making sure that they are not getting afflicted by these extra dots, and they are, again, Sun and Sky right away pulling into the boss.
So now we are in a fortified setting, but at a 24 level, especially in Seat, even in a non-tyrannical setting, these bosses are scary. We're seeing the kite up here as well in the meantime. Now, Zural has been pulled. They're doing another reset on the boss right now, and they're going to get ready to pull the boss right at the end there. Zural, for real, has been pulled on Skyline D's side. Now, of course, Jack, some of the things we need to watch out for here are that Decimate on the tank, where they do place down that kind of Void Zone AoE on the ground, causing some of those goos to also spawn and kind of slowly trail towards the boss. If they do reach the boss, we do know there's an immense amount of damage that goes onto the group.
Yeah, it's very interesting to talk about, and one of the big things that we've seen out of Skyline D constantly throughout this, all of their games really, have been how much they've been wanting to have extra, cleave through their Shuriken Storms, pumping it into more single target damage. So while, most groups are going to be looking to get all these oozes together, cleaving them all down, annihilating them, I'm really curious if they're going to try to control them and try to actually use them as extra fodder to be able to just pump out more single target damage when the boss becomes more vulnerable.
Indeed, and so now we do see the extra ability coming in for the boss here, where he will send one of the players down. I believe the healer cannot get targeted by this. However, the tank or DPS can. In this case, on your screens, you do see that the Blood DK for Skyline D has been sent down. He has that kind of phased, swirly icon on the screen. Once down there, the player is responsible for killing 10 of the small adds, and upon doing so, you will have to use your extra action button on the player, which will then stun the boss and cause him to take 200% increased damage for somewhere in the 10 to 12 second range.
You're seeing these adds getting so close here, and like we were talking about, getting the extra damage into the boss, just absolutely annihilating them, but they are so close. They have to be very careful. Maybe getting the Typhoon in there, perfect control out of the rest of Druid, making sure that they're still in range of the Shuriken Storm. They're still getting the slows down. You are seeing, again, the DND with tightening grip, making sure that the slows continue. So much damage. The boss getting down to 20% here, right coming out of the exposed phase.
Now, Jack, something we do have to mention as a general theme for this dungeon is the void on the ground, including the one that's spawning in the boss here. A common theme we'll see in the next area of the dungeon. Any enemy that treads through it will have a buff while they stand in it for 100% increased damage done. You definitely want to avoid it as much as possible. I beat you to it. I saw your mouth opening. Excellent. You're welcome, chat. Now, Zural also going down to 50% on SunSky's side. They've already had one of their burn phases, if I'm not mistaken, as well, and they're nowhere near the amount of damage that Skyline D has output on Zural. I mean, the rogues are just built for this with the death from above as well. And notice how well they kept those goos close. This is going to be really close. They managed to kind of squeak through. No problem there. Should be able to get the last couple percent. But what they did when you were scared that those adds were so close to the boss, they're actually perfectly doing that so that the rogues could get those Shuriken Storms onto those adds right beside the boss and get that extra, just crazy amount of single target damage on the boss. Look at the differential on the damage between the rogues and the Demon Hunter. Finally, they finish him off, and they will be heading over to that RP with Ilaria.
Fantastic plays there by Skyline D, and amazing control. Like I said, my mouth was open, my mouth was agape, just watching the Demon Hunter was just kiting the boss just right through them and getting them perfectly all stacked up together. Right, SunSky is just struggling on this boss and forced to reset after they did not have the same control again that Skyline D did, and having some of those little oozes just going into the boss and dealing tons.
And of course, they've already invested time warp. You can see the debuff on the screen right now, so they're going to have to restart that boss with an absolutely just, it's going to take them ages at this point. In the meantime, Skyline D waiting for that wall to open up before they jump down to the goo pack. Did they pull that pack from the first boss area or from the second boss area? We'll have to keep an eye on it. It looks like they pulled it from, I believe, the first boss area indeed. So they're kind of AoEing that down efficiently while the RP happens with Ilaria in order to open the portal to the next zone. And Jack, we do know in the next zone there's kind of a bit of an event that happens. We do have to deal with those Rift Wardens quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, but you're seeing right there as they're trying to maximize their time before the whole is a gate where they're able to actually get into the full field there, making sure they're able to get into the Rift Wardens, engaging with them very rapidly. They do need to close 3 Void Portals before they are able to actually engage with the following boss of Saprish. So it's very, very important to be able to engage with these Rift Wardens, get them down quickly, but also stay engaged with them quite as long as you can. You want to be able to make sure, for example, that you're not getting any extra Voidling spawns, especially when we're in an explosive format here. We're making sure we're not getting any extra explosives that are, kind of going out of melee range, out of, where we're generally accepted to have the control over. And again, you're seeing out of Skyline D, when you're having a lot of these little oozes out there at the disposal, you want to be making sure that you're kiting them out, making sure you're seeing Ursul's Vortex coming out here by the Restoration Druid, making sure that they're getting, these ads kited out, avoiding the debuffs, dispelling the debuffs whenever they can.
And those Havoc Demon are just doing so well to keep on top of all of those explosive orbs that are spawning. See him running around on the screen and just war-glaving everything down. The Rift Warden about to go down here. And of course, Jack, as you mentioned, as soon as this Rift Warden dies, we do have this kind of gauntlet event where every 20 or so seconds we will have those small fragments fall onto each one of the players. Now, the way to avoid that is by quickly pulling and getting in combat with the next Warden. That will prevent from this event from spawning in the meantime. As you can see, they want to have nothing to do with that, so they quickly mass stealth and head over to the second Warden, which always spawns in that predetermined location on the right side of where they initially entered the zone. In the meantime, of course, always keeping an eye on the other team, SunSky. Currently still working on Z'rell. Unfortunately, they did have that wipe, so they are down to 50% on that. Second Warden now going down quite quickly, rather, for Skyline D.
Yeah, I love what they're doing here, where they're able to actually get that first Shroud of Concealment to get to the Rift Warden very, very rapidly, and they're pulling the mobs on their own terms. They want to make sure that they're able to just get past any of the especially lethal, especially annoying mobs. Because a lot of times what you end up doing is if you're going to pull those mobs, for example, without any kind of Shroud, or you're just going to actually have to engage with them as you're running into the Rift Warden, you get into this very awkward situation where you're going to be having a lot of suppression fields going out, a lot of slows, and a lot of snares that are coming out that are just harming your group while you're trying to get everything together. And even before you can get everything together, you just have such a headache on your hands. So I love that they're avoiding that.
Yeah, they're doing really well. Now, once this Warden goes down, the run to the third portal is actually substantially far. It's about double the distance from the first to the second portal, so they're going to really have to quickly hustle over. We didn't talk as well too much about the tricksters that are present in this dungeon. There's about 5 or 6 of them on set patrol pass. In fact, we see one pop up right now. They are stealthed and can jump out of nowhere, because they're stealth, and immediately attack whoever they aggro, really. So it could be the healer caught off in the back by accident. Keep in mind, of course, we are in that fortified setting right now, so they can really do quite a bit of damage. And I'm sure, Jack, you've been caught in that unfortunate situation where one of them has jumped you before as a healer.
I'm no stranger to any of the tricksters jumping me on, especially when you're in the situation where you are made of cloth as a priest. So it's especially big for them to watch out. Nice to see, they have the Shroud going in and they have a Shroud going out, and they are finally, and you're seeing on SunSky's side, they are finally getting Z'rell down, finally actually able to enter into the zone and start dealing with the Rift Wardens. So while Skyline D is going after one more Rift Warden before they're actually able to engage with Saprish, SunSky is just beginning.
Indeed, Skyline D now moving over and getting ready to pull some of this trash. They still have to make their way over to that last Warden, which you'll soon see on the right side of the screen. There it is, ominously in that glowing purple aura in the distance. They opt to kind of go around the side. There's 2 ways to reach him, of course. They opt to go around the side through that kind of void creek there. Now, you want to make sure you move out of that immediately, which is what they do to that kind of safe aisle on the side there, making sure you don't have that 100% increased damage buff on those mobs, because the Warden I can't speak today, apparently. They can pack quite a punch. Got it. Now, thing to watch out for as well, he has that Stygian Blast, which you want to make sure you interrupt, because if it nukes someone, it will fear them and also do a ton of damage to them.
Yeah, but you're also looking at how much they have to really spread out in this area where they really have to avoid any void zones. I'm stealing it again. And you're also seeing the cheat death going after one of the rogues there just because it is such a small area that they actually are able to keep all those mobs in, making sure that they're not staying into any of those void zones, getting all the interrupts they have that are required. And I really would have liked to see them actually pull us back even further, making sure that they're actually able to pull that Trickster, because there is one more Trickster that's going to be in between where they're standing right now and Saprish.
Right, you are there. You're right in tricky locations throughout the map. SunSky finally moving past the first boss, as we saw a bit earlier, working on that first Warden. They're quite behind at the moment with how kind of flawlessly, honestly, at the moment, Skyline D and how pre-planned and well-routed they are right now. It's going to be really tough to catch them. And it's kind of the same story every time we see these teams facing Skyline D. It's, I hope, they hope that Skyline D messes up and wipes somewhere. Now, Skyline D, as much praise as we give them, we have seen them in a couple of maps where things have not gone their way. They've been a bit of a sloppy play, a couple of wipes here and there. It has happened. Certainly not immortal. So if there's any dungeon that could break down some of these exceptional teams, this would be the one.
That's right. This would be the one. This is the one you also, where it's the furthest away for these teams when you're looking at, we just had the round of 8 yesterday, and looking at kind of the journey that these teams have had to work on, just the amount of dungeons that they've had to practice to make sure that they're able to be prepared for it. And we saw, for example, with the other Skyline team, that they were no stranger to being it, but they were not afraid at all of picking seat, and they played it many, many times just to be able to get it down pat. But you're seeing here with Skyline D, they're really showing for the first time how well they can perform on seat and absolutely annihilating this pack. Even there's tons and tons of damage.
Yeah, so one of the orbs did go off there. Luckily, no fatalities as a result. I mean, that Havoc Demon Hunter doing absolute work on those orbs. I see him constantly just peeling off nonstop, making sure none of those explosives are going off. Only one leak so far, but he's doing an exceptional job, especially considering the size of the pulls that they keep doing. He's on orb duty. In the meantime, the rogues, of course, massacring the rest of the pack, as we can see on the damage meter. The Demon Hunter, of course, not far behind either. Moving over to that second Warden, SunSky has already kind of crept up that right side from where they enter the second area, and they're dealing with him. We do see that a Purgatory has already procced on their Blood DK in the meantime.
Yeah, but you're seeing there was actually a point for Skyline D where all 3 of their melee had suppression fields onto them, and they were really just trying to stay spread from each other, and they were anticipating the quaking already going out. So just fantastic control here, fantastic planning on account of everything that can go wrong. You're running with a triple melee comp, which is again very, very foreign to most people running Mythic Plus.
Right, you are. Now, we didn't mention what the point of killing those Wardens was in the first place. Of course, by killing the 3 Wardens, we then have access to Saprish, as you can see, is so ominously sitting there with his little pets. You kill the 3 Wardens, Saprish spawns, and Saprish is indeed the second boss of the dungeon. The reason Skyline D is kind of clearing a lot of the trash in the area around is because Saprish requires a fair bit of real estate to make sure that you deal with properly. We do see another cheat death proc from the second rogue on Skyline D, so they will be particularly vulnerable on Saprish. Now, Saprish we'll talk about in a moment. There's a reason why they're clearing so much outside of just trash percentage. You want to make sure you have a nice kite path for him, as you will constantly displace the players by dropping traps frequently and making them obviously move out of the trap so you don't get stunned and nuked.
Yeah, but you're seeing here, it's very scary to actually have both cheat deaths already expended here for Skyline D, because again, when we're in this triple melee comp, one of the big themes that you want to be seeing with Saprish is keeping everybody pretty tightly packed in together, and really it's going to be quite dangerous when you're going to be having a lot of the mines. They're going to be all over the place, even having some of the cat or the dog or the cat hybrid jumping around for
okay, Rich.
The Richadiah jumping around, having his frontal AoE come, putting the dot out as well. All of these things just really have to be watching out for.
Right, you are. Everyone's favorite line. So now moving over, they will be pulling Saprish here in a moment. Now, things to note on Saprish. So there's a couple of things that can really help your damage output on this boss. Primarily, Darkfan, the elephant, will be jumping around the room and making so what happens is he will return to the tank and then eventually blink on the furthest opponent from where he is, meaning that if one of the ranged players is too far away, then he'll blink 30 yards away from where Saprish and the Sky Terror are, and then you don't get effective cleave, as these mobs do share a health pool. So you're seeing that the team is kind of sticking together very well to make sure to try and get as much cleave as possible. Not so well there, of course. Darkfang spawning away, and of course, these Fell Explosives are pretty... Ooh, they kill that last Fell Explosive. So these Fell Explosives do, of course, spawn from the bosses as well. The Shadewing will jump around once in a while, I think every 20 or 30 seconds or so, and you do need to make sure you interrupt that AoE fear from them, else everybody will get disoriented and feared for those 5 seconds. But it is really important. I'm actually surprised they're not taking as much advantage of cleaving onto Darkfang as they could, especially in a triple melee comp and with 2 sub-rogues.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to see when you're talking about that. I mean, a lot of times they're kind of just getting the extra, combo points points out of using the Shuriken Storm to dump more damage into their primary target. But it definitely is something that you wanted to kind of see a little bit more of, and also maybe a little bit more of damage coming out of the rest of Druid, because you are seeing he's at this point really kind of moving around, and if anything, he's kind of setting the tone for where they're going to be moving in the future. But one of the most dangerous things is we're getting into this situation where you have to deal with the Fel explosives that you are leaving behind. You're waiting for the mines to explode where they're sitting right on top of the Fel explosives. You're waiting for them to explode, then you have to move back onto that location to get back on top of the Fel explosives, and then you have Dark Fang jumping back there. So it really is just kind of bouncing between, almost 2 points or 2 or 3 points here coming up, while also having to stay spread out for Saprish's slicing ability, where he will just slice through players, and he will also gain damage for any of the players that he also slices.
Which actually ends up translating to a lot of tank damage, to a lot of extra shadow damage on that tank. So the traps that he does drop as well, we didn't mention, we do have an explosive go off there. Luckily, nobody does suffer as a result, but the traps that he drops there will eventually kind of get bolstered. As you can see right now, he will purposefully manually set them off, so that's why the players are trying to make sure that they stay nice and far away in the meantime. Dark Fang nearby yet again. Another explosive in the back about to go off. Does go off. No fatalities in the end, but, I'm not going to lie, I was expecting a bit better play from Skyline D on this boss. They could have brought these mobs a bit closer together, couldn't got some cleave, letting some, as a result, that we said another explosive goes off there. They just keep healing through these explosives, and there's a lot of damage to heal on this fight anyways, so the rest of Druid doesn't really have time to go and deal with the explosives that they're leaving behind.
Well, I think it's just part of the legendary setup that you're seeing on behalf of the Druid. You really wanted to start seeing more of an attention given to these Fel explosives. The rest of Druid just seems very content to be able to actually just heal through it, but I think it's a huge mistake that they're making here. Rather than focusing on their HPS, which probably is going to be quite high, they really have very low DPS for an opportunity where they would be able to take like Fury of Nature, take Lady and the Child, and have just such huge cleave getting onto all 3 mobs, but also being able to have a stronger Moonfire there, that way the rest of Druid, not the Demon Hunter, would be more easily able to be set up to actually take out these explosives.
It's late, Jack. It's late. I know how you feel. Now, the second rogue we do see actually re-proc cheat death once again, so luckily it did become available throughout this very lengthy fight for Skyline D. SunSky, of course, on the right side of the screen. We haven't forgotten about them. They have finally moved over as well and started to work on Saprish. Now, they are 5% behind on Trash. Not the biggest deal in the world. There's a couple of tricks you could do, especially after the third boss. You have a bit of downtime with that RP opening the door. They can move over and kill some trash during that, but it's going to be about SunSky. Now, based on how Skyline D finally has just now killed Saprish, there is some efficiency to be made up from SunSky that we were commenting on earlier in terms of getting the mobs together and getting some good cleave on them. So we'll see if they're able to take advantage of that. Not so much. We already see Dark Fang in the back cleaving by himself, though.
Yeah, you're seeing, those extra opportunities, but it really was very thankful that almost exactly when one of Skyline D's rogues had actually gotten their cheat death off cooldown, they immediately reprocced it again. So, it was very interesting just to be able to see that they had that extra, backdoor really that was available to them. But one of the things I want to see when we're going into Viceroy's room here is how Skyline D is going to be handling, for example, the Great Sorcerer, how they're going to be handling the Dark Matter. We saw Skyline's sister team, Skyline Top, actually just line of sight them almost entirely because they didn't at least believe that they had the focus damage towards it, but as a result, it actually ended up taking them quite a bit of time. But it was a lot safer, so they were able, Skyline Top was winning that game, but I would be interested in seeing Skyline D here. How much time are they going to spend on that, and is SunSky better and prepared for it?
Yeah, we'll just have to take a look at that. Skyline D, of course, there are 2 paths to approach Viceroy's area in the meantime. One of them is this typical path where you kind of split the groups up the middle, making sure you drag those little goos along with you. The other one is kind of going around the backside where you will meet one of the trick-or-treatsters, and then you will pull them out of that void, making sure to DPS them down prior to aggroing some of this trash. Now, the trash here is really nasty. Some of the worst trash in the dungeon. Oh, there's a trick and treat.
There you go.
So they're going to have to deal with the tricks here first. Yeah. What a treat. So there is a patrol around the area from that Shadow Weaver mage that we were talking about. Very, very nasty mini-boss style mob that does spawn that dark matter, which will kind of suck players in and eventually explode for a substantial amount of damage, if not killed within time. So we're going to see, hopefully, some good target switching immediately from Skyline D to kill those once they do aggro. But also the trash coming up here. Actually, they decide to kind of stealth across first. I doubt they're going to pull the boss because it aggroes all the trash. They do move past that patrol that always moves in that clockwise direction. Now, things to note here, those Void Flares, Jack, really unassuming mobs, but a ton of damage can come out of them.
It's absolutely vital to just focus them down, tunnel them down as rapidly as possible. Of course, they are rooted into the ground, so you are not going to be able to actually have, any opportunity to have any pushbacks. You're going to be relying on stuns. You're going to be relying on interrupts. And at this point, Skyline D is just playing such a great game here, playing efficiently. The Void Flares are dying immediately. You're seeing, again, SunSky having, 6 deaths to Skyline D's 0. Such clean play here.
Yeah, so, we have had 1 extra death on SunSky. We only have that 5 death wipe from the first boss, and recently they've tallied another one, which is another 5 seconds on the board. Unfortunately, they're still working on Saprish, though, 20% now, and after dealing with that, we'll probably see something similar approaching the Viceroy area. They do decide to cut across again and deal with that second set of tentacle trash first. Then we'll have the 3 goos, which likely I believe they will try to combine with that patrolling Shadow Weaver pack.
Be very interesting to see as well with Skyline Indeed if they're going to actually go after the entirety of that patrol pack, or if they're actually going to be going and trying to CC and kind of get a piecemeal. You're seeing Sun and Sky here actually losing their healer, trying to see if they even have any battle res, and they do not have any battle res left available, so they have to burn the last 8%. No healer left available. They have to be just playing so safely here, relying on, you know, the team no healers instructions to relying on DK's Leech in order to survive.
So they should be able to do it. I mean, 1% on Saprish. Finally, they do manage to get it down. No other fatalities. The healer can't be rezzed at this point, so I don't believe... Oh, there is a checkpoint here, if I'm not mistaken.
Right,
yeah, so there's a checkpoint here. He is able to release, and they'll start moving over to Viceroy's trash. While in the meantime, of course, Skyline D on the main screen here, dealing with the rest of that trash and rearing up to pull that really nasty Shadow Weaver pack in a moment.
You're seeing there, Skyline D, like, did end up pulling all of the oozes just away from that pack. They're all kind of just pushing themselves just a little bit further away from the patrol that's going out. And they do have the opportunity, for example, just to get one of the imprisons off on one of them, just to kind of prevent them from engaging with some of them. But it'll be interesting to see if they just take it all up at once, because they really don't have any kind of good positioning where they're standing right now to actually be able to dodge the dark matter if they wanted to.
Yeah, so they do get a double sap on those mobs right now, and there is the Shadow Weaver indeed. They are respecting just how dangerous this one mob is. They do pull it while leaving the other 2 sapped. It's just that dangerous. You want to deal with it solo. Fel explosives going off, they do well to handle it. The Void Discharge, only some damage on the tank, but you want to keep an eye on the screen. As soon as that Grand Shadow Weaver spawns one of those dark matters, they will want to immediately kill it. It should be deleted off your screen in just a moment, the moment it spawns, rather, because it just does so much damage. 24 fortified.
Yeah, but you're seeing right there the advantage that they're able to have, just having the focus damage, having, you know, that good preparation for the dark matter. It is basically just the super explosive mode, and they need to just be able to kill it as quickly as possible.
We do have a fatality though from one of the rogues,
and the dark matter almost going off there. It was just very scary when you're losing that 1 DPS right at the point where you need as much damage on target as possible. It's just so wild.
Fortunately, it didn't matter that much in the end, but they will be moving around to those 2 sapped mobs. Now, they are still in combat technically because they did aggro that pack, so they're not able to res that rogue that's fallen at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no,
well, thankfully with the sap, they didn't.
No, they are. You're right. Yeah, they sapped prior to getting in combat with the oozes, so no problem with that. The saps do wear off, and those 2 mobs start padding across the room one more time. They're getting ready to kill those 2 mobs, which without that Shadow Weaver is not as dangerous for sure, but they'll have to just watch out for that and deal, of course, with that really annoying debuff that sucks you in, and you can outrange that, of course. Once they kill that, they will be starting on Viceroy himself. In the meantime, we are seeing actually that kind of backdoor strat in terms of approaching the Viceroy trash from SunSky on the right side of the screen.
Yep, and the backdoor strategy basically just involves going way around a lot of the architecture that, you know, it looks like there is a wall back there, but for Team Sun and Sky, there is just a small route. You do want to make sure your tank is up front and ready to engage that Trickster, because he is right up in your face. Unfortunately, Skyline D doesn't really have much of the opportunity to be able to outrange anything with their all melee comp. When they are all getting sucked in, they all basically have to be moving together as a group. Thankfully, there's no kind of like ground mechanics or volcanics that, you know, they have to be moving as a group, and the one person with the vacuum is deciding where everybody else goes, so they're getting it down. It is quite a bit of single target damage that you really have to focus on. Thankfully, the explosion at the end of the debuff isn't too bad. It's just for the focus on the single.
Friends stick together though, Jack, and there's that quaking,
like
which
you
is
and
quite,
me.
Yeah, which is quite irritating for kind of sucking them all together. Now we do have a Viceroy Nazar here. You know, a few of the mechanics for this boss, really nothing too crazy, but can get out of hand really quickly, and there's a bit of RNG element, especially for this group particularly. We have seen Skyline D run Seat during the China series before, but they honestly were very lucky with their tentacle spawns. The boss will spawn 3 tentacles randomly in the room, and of course, being an all melee comp, it's really beneficial for them to have them spawn as close together as possible. So we'll see exactly where they spawn. Not looking like the best spawn for them right now. You do have to kill these tentacles, Jack, because they do a ton of residual damage on the raid.
Yeah, and as a healer, you know, you really have to watch out for, because these void tentacles do not care if they're targeting 2 people at a time, and very rarely, you know, trying to focus on, you know, the healers, or very focusing just on so many of them all at once. I apologize. But one of the biggest things is you're going to actually have to be dealing with not only the tentacles coming out, that they still need to be able to kill that last one off in the back, but they also will be getting
what a horrible spawn.
They will also be having to deal with these spawns right as they're going to end up also having some Voidbender adds that will be shielding the boss as he casts an Eternal Twilight, which will just fear the entire group for about 5 or 6 seconds and cause them to go run screaming basically into the void zone that is just continually contracting over the course.
That's the Howling Terror, actually, so you want to make sure you interrupt that. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, though. The Eternal Twilight does come up here. They break through that shield by killing those 2 mobs, which can be gripped, so the advantage to the DK here, gripping the 2 mobs together, making sure that they cleave them down right away, and then continue to drag the boss on the tentacle. Now, there are, as we said, 3 things that need to be interrupted on this fight. One is that Eternal Twilight, which is casted when the boss reaches 100 energy. The second one is, of course, that Howling Terror, cast about every 15 seconds, otherwise everyone's AoE feared for 5 seconds. And the third, not so important, but also kind of important, is the general Dark Blast from the boss. The boss will actually not move unless that is interrupted, so in this all melee group, it is really important that they constantly interrupt it to get him near those tentacles and get that efficient cleave on the boss.
The other part of it is having that really strong positioning on Entropic Force here. As you're getting that knockback that's going to be going out, you want to make sure that you have as much of the room as possible to work with here. So you want to make sure that you're not, for example, standing near or in the dead center and you're getting part of your group just getting knocked into the void zone that is on the edges of the room. And they're actually getting pretty good spawns here with the tentacles, a little bit better than they've been getting in the past, right as, again, they're getting those Voidbender adds that are coming out here, just making sure they're able to focus all of them down before that Eternal Twilight goes off, getting the kick, being able to take down the extra tentacle. And while it looks like they did a fantastic job here, they're just getting those Voidbenders down so quickly, it can feel like an eternity, let me tell you, as a healer, when you're having to deal with 1 or 2 tentacles that are left alive as the rest of the group is forced to actually switch to those Voidbender adds.
Okay, so a decent spawn here with 2 tentacles nearby. I mean, I gotta tell you, we've been discussing this boss to death. I mean, my hair is in my eyes with Set right now, and the boss is still only at 40%, which kind of shows the RNG and the inefficiency of having this 3 melee comp on this boss, as they constantly need to kick, move the boss around. If they don't get that kick, kill all the tentacles in the meantime. Of course, we are having some issues over on SunSky's side. We do see 2 more deaths go down on the board for them as they're wrapping up this last of the trash prior to Viceroy. They do manage to kill it off, so they're going to get the res here as we see the Disc Priest casting right now. Hopefully that...
Oh, he made it!
He made it. Unfortunately, rather, that Quake does not interrupt his cast. That would have been quite unfortunate. Another 10 seconds on the board if that were to be the case. They do get everyone up. All of the trash is dead on Viceroy right now, and for their sake, I hope they get some good tentacle spawns, because right now they are 45 seconds deaths worth behind Skyline D, and both of them are done with trash, because we do know they will complete their trash from the Wardens within Lura's room.
And you're seeing not only is a huge deficit there with deaths, but they're also having just a massive difference in health pools for the boss fight. 23% for Skyline D to SunSky's 91%. And again, like we said, Skyline D has had this big focus of constantly throughout, their entire run of the Chinese regionals, making sure they're able to get more and more adds to be able to cleave, to pump out more single target damage. And they really haven't been having it with a lot of the tentacle spawns. They really haven't been staying that close together. It's been really hard to actually get 2 of them together close enough to even have like a Chaos Nova stun.
Yeah, I mean, nothing, honestly for them, nothing but the Bermuda Triangle spawn worth of tentacles we've seen in just like all the possible edges of the room, ends of the room. Viceroy now at 80% over on SunSky's side. In the meantime, Viceroy, albeit slow, but slow and steady, they are finishing the last 2 adds, making sure they interrupt that Eternal Twilight cast. Otherwise, that will one-shot the entire group. Finishing it off, Viceroy going down to 4% in just a moment. That rogue getting so low, no cheat death proc there, fortunately for them. They do have that tentacle kind of spewing off. They decide to ignore the remaining tentacles and finish Viceroy off in the meantime, therefore triggering the RP between Ilaria and them so that they open the door, and Viceroy only down to 72% now, and that's a horrible tentacle spawn as well for SunSky.
It was actually a terrifying moment there for Skyline D as they basically hard committed to making sure that they were going to be the just tunneling the boss right as the Voidbender ad comes up, shields them. They need to be able to get those down, and they're not touching the tentacles at all because they thought they'd be able to actually kill it quick enough. So it's just a very terrifying moment there where you had that rogue getting focused by 2 tentacles at once, and the healers forced to spam them as hard as they could, but it was a really good job there.
SunSky now working on Viceroy in the meantime. Lots of damage going out with that entropic pushback. They do have the Mage to kind of help them with these the tentacles that spawn, but not as effective as, say, a Moonkin or a Shadowpraise or a Warlock in the meantime, that could kind of effectively multi-dot everything. They do have to kind of turn and burn some of them, and with them being so far away, that Ignite is not going to be very effective spreading. We do have a death go down, unfortunately, from the Warrior, and now the Priest goes down as well. They do have 1 battle res in their favor. They use it on the Warrior, who chooses not to accept it. In fact, they translated over to the Death Priest, who does accept it, but now they are stuck 3-manning as they have another death go down. The Mage indeed does fall, and at this point it's going to be a full wipe on the team as those explosives completely overwhelm them. And now they're going to have to start on Viceroy from scratch. Now, Skyline D already moving in Lura's room. In the meantime, these two Rift Wardens will be their final percentage for trash, and then they'll have access to that final boss.
The second time Sky has actually had to reset a boss halfway through. Just having this full team wipe, again, just hurts so much. But one big thing between Holy and Disc that you would have access to is if you're choosing to play Holy Priest, you're able to have the Chastise, you're able to spec into Censure, then you're able to have a stun for every single tentacle every single time, offering that that 5-second little bit of advantage. But it is really rough when you're able to have that spread damage. And again, it looks like they didn't quite have the, they had about the same luck that Skyline D did with the tentacle spawns.
Yeah, I mean, Viceroy just having a dark blast with that team in the meantime. Skyline D now prepping to pull Lura in here. Lura, a bit of a weird boss. A couple phases associated here. As soon as you pull the boss within 2 seconds, she becomes immune and will spawn one of those greater Rift Wardens on the left side of the screen where we're looking now. Only once we defeat that Warden will it close the dark portal on the side that will also stem the flow of those little voidlings coming in, giving access to a 10-second vulnerability phase on Lura that does 200% increased damage to her in the meantime. Once that ends, we will actually have 2 greater Wardens that spawn. You kill one of them and then another one because you don't want to deal with absorbing their Meteor Shadow Soak mechanic too much, which, as we can see at the bottom of the screen, if you don't soak that, it will nuke the entire group. Kill Jaden, we hear you. And once you deal with that, we'll have a second round of vulnerability for 10 seconds, after which we'll discuss that phase when we get there. But Jack, most teams will opt to use that Heroism Bloodlust at the start of that first burn phase.
Yeah, exactly right, and it gives you such a fantastic advantage when you're able to not only get the the Bloodlust up for that first backlash, but ideally you want to be able to take care of these Rift Wardens as rapidly as possible. They can be such a pain to deal with, especially from a healer perspective, when you really have to be worrying about any of the Voidlings coming out from both portals at a time, puts so much stress on your tank to actually be able to pick up all those adds when you're drawing all kinds of healing aggro.
And we're just seeing those DFAs come down from the Rogue, each one chunking 4-5% off the boss. 425, not 45. Of course, the boss would have been dead then, because of that 200% vulnerability. Now, carrying over with that Bloodlust onto these greater Rift Wardens, you can see they've intelligently marked one of them with a skull, wanting to get rid of them as quickly as possible, making sure that they don't have double of these Shadow Meteors to soak. In the meantime, my God, my head is burning from this Lura yell in the background, just resonating in my brain. One of the Rift Wardens about to go down at this point. Unfortunately, Skyline D has full screen SunSky.
Yeah, full screen indeed, and I love the positioning that we're seeing out of the rest of Druid there, making sure that they're actually going to be able to, always have all the little Voidling adds moving in towards the boss there, moving in towards the tank there, making sure any drawn healing aggro is always going to be moved into the same position every single time. Makes it so much easier, not only for the tank to pick it up, but also for the rogues to keep on continuing, cleaving into that Rift Warden, having that extra damage getting into them, and making it so much more easy.
Oh, Dynamite! The healer goes down. Luckily, they have 4 battle reses, now 3, so they managed to get the healer up. At least it wasn't at too precarious of a time. If that death had come late into phase 2 on Lura, that could have been a different story. Everybody would take down quite rapidly. One of the rogues did unfortunately proc the cheat death during that little sequence there. The second burn phase about to start on Lura, and as alluring as her Scions of Sirens are right now, they will have to defeat this boss in order to finish the dungeon. Huge chunks of damage going into her. She does have that second vulnerability backlash phase, taking 200% increased damage, and they're starting the phase off at 44% HP on her.
It's really nice here when you're seeing having such huge burn phase. A very good job here by Skyline D. Big things are going to be standing on one side of that little stage that Lura is performing her little concert of ghastly wind chimes, and also you're just seeing the entire group doing a great job just trying to stick together as best as they possibly can. The rest of Druid thankfully is just able to have to step out of the group and just be able to make it a little bit easier. The rogue does look like he's getting kind of caught out here, just getting into this awkward little corner. You're trying to see if you put as much healing as possible on him, that way he's able to kind of step into the void, get that shadow step off, get back into with the team.
Yeah, making sure that there was no treasure in that corner. After that, Rogue found that out, joining the fight once again, making sure that they constantly bait these void zones that were left over from the little voidlings. Now, Jack, oh my God, we do have a huge chunk of damage go in, proccing the second cheat death on the second rogue there. Now, Jack, what I was about to say, in fact, is it kind of what just happened. This boss's Soften Rage and AoE damage on the group ramps out of control very quickly. This is a 24 after all.
It is indeed, and it's really actually well suited towards the rest of Druid. When you're able to have, for example, taking Germination, when you're able to have Cultivation, you're able to have these, the double rejuves, but you're also able to have that extra hot that kicks in whenever any of your allies are hitting 60% 100%, and they already have the rejuves on them. So it's a nice to be able to have that kind of backup plan and that kind of bounce back that makes it so much more easy to deal with this constant taking damage. And Rested Druid just does a phenomenal job and is really well suited towards this.
Yep, I mean, we do see a bit of damage going on there with the dot. No problem for the Druid to heal through. Druid, of course, sitting in the back by themselves. Why do you think the Druid is not opting to kind of join the players under the boss to make sure that the F-Low's taking on it? Are they even dropping F-Lows at this point? Is that efficient?
I think part of it is just going to be the quaking, making sure that they're kind of standing out of the way there, making sure that they are really just avoiding as best as they can, you know, splashing onto anybody else. There still is going to be that extra movement required. You're still going to have the Rested Druid, for example, making that extra movement anyway, so you might as well just make sure that, you know, the DPS, the 3 melee really that you're going to be having sitting in there is all going to be making sure they're staying, you know, as spread as possible, making their lives a little bit easier on the healer. As you're seeing, the Rested Druid has plenty of mana at their disposal, and they're getting Lura down with only 2 deaths.
And Lura will sing no more, Adrian.
Thank God. A tournament. It's been a grueling weekend. We've had so many ups and downs for many of these teams, but it really has been a story of SunSky and Skyline D. They've been the top 2 teams. Skyline D, 1 game away from confirming their placement as the top team in China, and where better to solve it than the Vault.
Of course, they're looking to the sky on this one. Now, Jack, in this dungeon, probably some of the most front-loaded, difficult trash of any of the dungeons. I mean, you're done about 50% of the trash by the time you get to Tirathon, the first boss. And the most dangerous thing of all of it here, of course, is Glaviana, that mini-boss that I believe we just saw a pull from SunSky right now.
Yeah, I love being able to just get all of this, you know, front-loaded in together, like you said. And Disc Priest, it can be quite well suited to actually deal with all of that. But it's very interesting to see that Skyline D is looking to circumvent a lot of that extra trash, and they are actually just pulling everything in together. They're getting all the rogue stealths going on, and I'm actually not sure if they did get Glaviana in with them as well.
In very typical fashion of Skyline D, we see they like to do this a lot, is kind of stealth past everything and get themselves in a very prime position. Everyone kind of stacks on that Blood DK, AoE grip on top of the Bleed DK, and then all of the melee just, you know, explode all over the trash. In the meantime, huge damage coming out of that the Havoc Demon Hunter, excuse me. They're dealing with all those mobs on the side. Of course, they will have to kind of watch their feet here. We do have a couple of these affixes affecting that with Volcanic and, of course, Quaking. Nothing too disruptive, but, you know, it can't catch you off guard sometimes. In the meantime, of course, SunSky still dealing with Glaviana, which just does so much damage. She takes so long, so much HP as well, and does that, of course, that pulsing damage once she hits 50% and metamorphosizes.
Yeah, just the huge damage that comes at that 50%. You also have to really watch out for the swoop that comes out. Just at close, you know, melee range. I believe it's around a 10-yard range, which you can swoop and just deal tons and tons of damage, especially when we're at that 24 setting. We're at 970 eye level. We're not having, for example, that extra avoidance that you see a lot of times on gear. Skyline D taking advantage of their next Shroud of Concealment there. They're getting the saps off. They're making sure they're able to skip past that other set of mobs that's usually extremely lethal. And interesting to see that they actually are just only pulling those last 2 mobs there and then pulling them into the boss.
Yeah, I mean, they're starting their RP from the boss right now. But, I mean, you know, you can just tell how well their composition is tailored to their strats, you know, taking advantage of that double mass stealth, something that doesn't cost them that 10-minute lockout on their pots by using the Invis potions. In the meantime, of course, up the stairs, leading to the corner around where you'll find the first boss is SunSky. They are still dealing with that trash chiseling through it. Now, SunSky will have an advantage in trash percentage by the time they get out of this, but that doesn't really seem to phase Skyline. They know exactly what they're doing at this point. Not really a huge talking point until we get into the later dungeon.
I think what's fascinating is that Skyline was prepared for this. I mean, keep in mind, you know, once they'd made their qualifiers, they had, you know, they had to spend a lot of time, and Skyline D more than anybody else spent a lot of time making sure they got their time trials perfectly, and then they have, you know, a little bit more time to be able to get ready, and they're the very first region that's prepared for this, and they already have some fantastic strats in the first time they're running this dungeon.
And absolutely no surprise to see just like wherever they can grab this kind of advantage on the boss, pulling those 2 mobs and immediately starting the RP on the boss, allowing the rogues to once again Shuriken Storm on top of Tirathon in the meantime, getting a ton of single target damage. As we can see, their damage is skyrocketing at the start. Of course, they have dropped now, but those Fell Furies are spawning, one of the mechanics of the boss, even more targets for them to cleave around. And the triple melee comp being fairly advantageous on this boss specifically, because once those chains go out from the Warglaives, once the boss reaches that vengeance state, you know, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt if you have to sit there and hardcast. You have to kind of pre-position, making sure you're in a good spot, getting healed, etc. Whereas this melee train just kind of follows the boss wherever it goes. No problem, no DPS lost.
This melee train has no breaks, as you're seeing. You know, they were able to get the trash packs, cleaving onto those. Once the trash packs die to the inevitable cleave, they're getting little furies that they're able to take in. So it's just such a great job being able to have such immense control over these mobs, and they have interrupts galore at their disposal, so they're not really worrying too much about any of the other, you know, negative effects of having these mobs. So just the great planning that I'd love to be able to see at a Skyline D, and it's really showing why they're number one.
You know, interestingly enough, actually, we do see that SunSky, excuse me, is actually has a bit less trash percentage than does Skyline. We were just about to say, you know, that they're going to have a much more trash percentage, but they do end up skipping some of that trash around the corner there. So it's in fact them that will have to make up some of the trash later compared to Skyline. But of course, they're not too far behind on Tirathon right now. About a 20% differential between the two teams. There comes that first I-beam. Anybody caught in that will, of course, be disintegrated immediately. Skyline as well to move out of the way on that. While in the meantime, SunSky getting to that phase in a moment.
Yep, and as you're seeing here, the different phases that are coming out on Tirathon here, very, very important that there's going to be the transitions here. He's going to be in the more tanky phase, as you're seeing on the right side of your screen with SunSky. He's now just moving out into the Havoc phase where he's going to not be taking, or he will be taking a normal amount of damage. He will not be in that tank phase, having reduced damage taken. So this is going to be the opportunity really for SunSky to start catching up. You know, really want to start seeing more damage coming out of, like, say, the disc, where he's already doing quite a bit more than the rest of Druid here. But the rest of Druid also kind of has a little bit more of a job on his hands because they are constantly holding on to those Furies throughout the encounter, and they are, you know, inevitably going to be dealing a little bit more damage healing here and there. But having the extra stress on the healer, but also as a result having so much more damage that the DPS can pump out, seems to be a great winning strategy for them.
So we do see the split here. Typically, of course, once Tirathon goes down, you do have that kind of entrance on either side of the hallway in order to get to this Imp Mother, Foul Mother in the meantime. Now, all of these Imps do give you, of course, percentage, so it's important, of course, to pull all of them and imperative to kill them before they manage to explode and do too much damage to the group. The Foul Mother, of course, benefiting from that, for the rogues rather, on the Foul Mother, benefiting once again from that AoE of the Shuriken Storm, dealing a massive amount of single target damage to her while cleaning up all the imps in the meantime, and of course SunSky doing the same and going on both angles.
It's an impressive combo that you have for those imps there as they're taking down the Foul Mother there, getting the rest of the damage out. And they do a fantastic job actually getting a really, really good cleave out there, making sure that they're still able to have some consistency there with any of the imps that are spawning. They're always able to have just a little bit more damage. And while this mob generally seems like you're going to be something along the lines of a tank and spake, it's very, very easy for any of the little foul, you know, detonations that are going to be going off any of the void zones that Foul Mother does spawn, just to be able to one-shot at DPS if they're not being careful.
No foul play there, indeed. They climb onto the elevator. Good timing for them. Although timing, of course, you know, in these races doesn't matter too much on these elevators as long as it's not on the way up. They would have just avalanche potion and jumped down. Nonetheless, they do catch it at the top of its path, ride it all the way down while SunSky in the meantime finishing up the Foul Mother themselves, and they will progress as well to this elevator. And right away we're met with everybody's favorite boss, Inquisitor Tormentrum.
Ah, new subjects. Where have I heard that before? Now...
Ah, beautiful. I just heard it in the background there. Now, along with Inquisitor Tormentrum, a lot of these teams oftentimes pull these extra small Defiler hounds on the side of the room, and what obviously it helps with trash percentage. You want to make sure to pull the Defilers and not the Scorchers. Actually, they end up pulling both of them, so they just have to make sure to interrupt them here, not let the drains go out and stun some of the, especially the healer in this case, making sure that they interrupt all of them. There's one of the drains going out right now. The interrupt does go out, and with a melee group especially, it's actually quite easy to deal with those kind of eyes that he spawns in the middle of the room and not get disoriented. You know, as a caster, sometimes it's kind of annoying to position yourself and look at the boss in the direction you need to, and those eyes as well, Jack.
Especially dangerous vault at prison that is getting opened up right now. You're dealing with a number of different demons that can be absolutely deadly. I believe it is the Annihilator ad that will charge one of your party members, stunning them, dealing quite a bit of extra damage. So it's going to be very, very important just to make sure that they're getting him down quick.
And dropping aggro on the tank, which is a huge pain in the butt, especially if this tank's not quick to pick it up again. It could turn around and smack one of the ranged or one of the DPS, one of the other DPS or the healer, of course. In the meantime, we do see Inquisitor Tormentrum being pulled by SunSky as well. They also opt to pull some of these dogs. Now, we do know Inquisitor Tormentrum actually does traverse to some of the corners, opening up the jails and releasing the contents here. So as a result of pulling the dogs on the side, we can finally perhaps answer the question, who let the dogs out?
An age-old question, indeed. And you're seeing Skyline D working 50% on Tormentum. They're working on getting that transition. Usually what you'll see on live, a lot of times people will be focusing on that line of sight just to make sure all the ads are going to get in nice and tight and clean together. You're always going to be facing the same direction for those eyes. But again, when you're in this time trial format, you need to be able to cut as many corners as possible, play aggressive and getting those down. And you're also seeing actually a quick death. Speaking of playing aggressive,
My
Skyline.
God, from Skyline D. I've lost all respect. No, I'm just kidding. Still
Skyline D to Skyline dead. Happens that quickly.
My God. Now, we should mention, of course, that Tormentrum does spawn the jail cells, 2 of the 4 throughout the fight at 70 and 40%. We're seeing the second round spawn here from Skyline D right now. They do actually opt to do the LOS strat that you were saying in the end. Now, this is a particularly menacing group that they just pulled here. It does a lot of damage, a lot of interrupts that need to be done as well. And we do see that players constantly poke out to try to bait some of these casts too. Now, I'm kind of surprised they're doing this, especially with the DK, because the DK can just immediately grip one of the far adds over or AU grip everything together and just deal with it on the spot. And they'd have such strong damage on Skyline D. So it's more of a qualitative advantage that they're trying to provide here with avoiding some of those casts during the eyes. And of course, not trying to get punted by some of those void bolts from that corner. In the meantime, that corner now spawning for SunSky.
You know, you made just an excellent point there of why they would be kind of going back to that as well, especially because of the fact that they're not able to line of sight everything. You actually did see the movement there by the DK, making sure that they're able to move up, grab that Mind Flayer. Both of the prisons on that left side, in the back left where you're seeing the Mind Flayer as the old guys, and also the one in the front left that's going to be more the Mogu base, they both have adds that will just sit there and keep on casting if you're not able to bring them in. So I was really expecting actually to see quite a bit more focus there, but I do think that it was part of it was just the respect that they had for the Demon Wing, making sure that they were absolutely able to obliterate that Annihilator. And really, these mobs, as long as you're getting the kicks, as long as you're getting the interrupts, they usually are not going to be too hairy.
Really, Jack?
I'm ready to inform you about it.
Okay. Skyline D now cleaning up Tormentrum, and they'll be moving over to that Mistress mini-boss, of course, with the hounds that she has on the side as well. They'll have to be careful because the Defilers, the Scorchers rather, do of course explode for extra damage and will buffer in the meantime as well. Nothing that should be too dangerous for them right now. It is fortified though, so her damage could get a bit rough towards the end. Shouldn't be too bad. Once again, Inquisitor Tormentrum for SunSky, they did decide to deal with that jail where it spawned, unlike Skyline D, and they dealt with it quite well. No fatalities, nothing to speak of there. They're just finishing off the rest of Tormentor himself. 11% now on the board for them. In the meantime, of course, Skyline D working on Ileana here, and we do have to be careful. Ileana does do a couple of things that you want to make sure you dispel from the tank, or actually for anyone in the group it could drop on, and she also does that AoE Deafening Roar.
Yeah, it's quite nice, for example, where you're not having too many casters in your group when you're having nothing but melee, although it could be quite important. I believe the I-Beam can be interrupted, and it could actually lock out the Demon Hunter, for example. You always have to be watching out for that cast. It can deal, or it can just really lock you out of your situation, or you lock you out of your certain abilities. You're seeing the I-Beam going out immediately after, of course, her shout goes out, just taking no chances there. Healer doing an excellent job getting those dispels off, and really they're doing a great job here, making sure that the Scorchers, for example, are being taken down piecemeal. They're not detonating both of them at once. They're making sure they're doing a good job at getting all the kicks that they required on it. So fantastic job there.
So now that Skyline D has gotten past that point, they do have the option of going to one of the 2 next bosses. Of course, they decide to actually save Glazer for later, oftentimes because of things like CDs, heroism time, etc. So they will be heading over, to Ash Golem first, which is this huge molten giant that is currently encased in ice, and once they start the encounter, of course, will break out of that ice, and you can refreeze them occasionally when the statues on the side spawn, leading to that brittle phase where he will take 20% increased damage for 20 seconds.
Well, as you see right now, Ash Golem has begun to blaze it up. They are going to be getting the freeze trap coming in on him as quickly as possible, getting that brittle phase started. It is very important to know when he is in this fiery phase, he will spawn little volcanoes and will be able to spawn, which you'll see right after this freeze phase, he will be able to spawn some little fiery embers. If any of those embers actually touch any of the flames that he will be putting on the ground, they will get enraged and they will cast a very nasty detonate.
Yes, they will detonate on the group indeed. In the meantime, of course, they will be working on that brittle phase, popping all of their CDs, trying to get as much damage in, and we do know Skyline D has a tremendous amount of burst damage. In a moment, though, he should be melting out of that ice, much like you melt my heart, Jack, and they will be starting to spawn all of the fiery zones on the ground in just a moment. We do see the volcano plume spawning on the side. There's the first of the zones. Now, these zones can be absorbed, of course, by pre-immuning and running through them. They do leave a nasty stacking dot, so oftentimes we see, for instance, a DK in this case try to pre-AMS and grab some of them, but they will want to avoid... Oh, the Ember actually unfortunately spawned right on top of one of those. They will detonate. It shouldn't kill anybody, I don't think. Yeah, there we go. So about 30 to 50% hit on the group. Nothing too scary. Of course, we're not in a tyrannical set. setting, and SunSky just now starting on Ash Golem as well.
And it was just, it was actually kind of a scary situation when you were having that, where the quaking was going off right as, of course, you were having to deal with the detonates. And it really, thankfully, when you're in a situation playing as a Rested Druid, you are able to keep on putting out hots, especially if you're going to be running with something along the lines of Cultivation, where you're able to kind of get that extra hot that's going to kick in whenever they drop below 60%. So that is a tremendous advantage for them. We always have to watch, you know, some of the differences between Disc and Holy. If there was a similar situation there would be quite a delay on getting the heals out.
Yep, so Ash Golem, of course, now chilling out again with his second round of statues. They should be able to promptly finish him off, after which they will, with no trash between them, head off to the fourth boss, Glazer. Ash Golem now at 53% for SunSky. In the meantime, dealing with some of the same mechanics we just discussed, seeing a lot of those flame patches spawn on the ground. Soon enough, we'll be seeing some of those embers as well. So Skyline D downing Ash Golem and quickly running over to Glazer's room.
That's right. And you're seeing the similar routes that are coming out. And it'd be interesting to see as well. You know, we kind of see a lot of times regions have very, very similar characteristics of what is generally accepted, of like what orders that you're generally going to be going for. So it's kind of interesting to see, you know, both teams taking out Ash Golem first before Glazer, and also you're seeing that they have already used Bloodlust, Skyline D, that is, so they're going to be moving on to Glazer, and they will be expecting to actually have that two-face.
Yep, so of course we do have our resident eyeball boss here, Lloyd Glazer. Don't worry, we're going to keep it clean today. So they're about to pull Glazer here in a moment. Now, about 40 seconds into the fight, he will go immune and not bat a single eyelash at the rest of the group, and during that immunity phase, there will be a statue that spawns. Now, we're kind of playing a game of redirecting the beam that he cast from his eyeball into the statues that spawn. Should that beam be redirected into that pulsing statue, it will essentially kill the entire party. So they're going to have to nuke it down. I guess no problem for this group to do a lot of that single target damage. But another important mechanic, Jack, here is of course, these orbs that spawn from the boss and go out to the walls.
That's exactly right. And of course, there will be 4 orbs spawning, blue orbs spawning out from inside the boss there, and they will be targeting the closest player to the orbs once they reach their reset position. So once they reach that outside of the wall, they will then go and target one player, start moving in their direction. And ideally, you want to be in this scenario where you are going to be aiming them back into Glazer, dealing a little bit of additional damage into them. As you're seeing here, Skyline D is redirecting all the mirrors, trying to break the focus of Glazer. Glazer blinks and, of course, lowers the shield.
Absolutely. Glazer taking 100% increased damage. Now you can see the damage chunking down. Glazer, of course, receiving straight A's in school. He was an excellent pupil indeed. Moving over SunSky in the meantime, also pulling Lord Glazer. They're starting their 40-second cycle before the next immunity phase starts for them. But Glazer got absolutely annihilated here by Skyline D during that 100% increased damage taken phase. I mean, those DFAs just landing and doing so much damage. Glazer down for them, and they will be running over, and I would more than assume, of course, stealthing past that mini-boss Jailer, especially on the fortified setting, and heading downstairs to the dark area.
That's right. You're seeing, Skyline D do an excellent job at just really showing the chops, just being able to dunk on this boss, absolutely destroying him in that single phase once he has been released. It's nice being able to be in that fortified format. They are grabbing a couple of the extra Scorchers here. They're not too deadly to be dealing with when they're in, like that situation where they're going to be alone. So it's very, very easy to get that additional trash percentage. They are going to be avoiding most of the spider mobs once they go downstairs. So usually you'll be seeing something along the lines of just invisibility potions or stealth, along with an avalanche potion to kind of avoid any of the little fall damage that can kind of break through the invis pots when you go down here.
Yeah, so indeed they are skipping this Jailer. I mean, just takes a ton of takes a ton of time to kill. So we're gonna have to see where this next elevator kind of lines up for them. They will be avalanching down just like you said. In the meantime, hopefully they catch it not on the way up. Otherwise, they're gonna have to kind of incur all that time waiting for the elevator to go up and down one more cycle. Most of them seem to squeeze by. They're gonna pick up the light here. Now, the light is key to the dark mechanics down here. You cannot target and DPS any of the mobs down here unless they are exposed by this light. So they will jump down. They're going to kill this first 4 set of spiders, after which I assume they're going to skip most of the next trash and head over to that last ad, which is required to be killed in order to unlock the door to Cordana.
That's right. You're going to be seeing, of course, these spiders are going to start running away when they reach about 40-50% health. So it's very, very important to make sure you have, Ursul's Vortex going down right there. Excellent move by the Rista Druid, just to make sure you're going to be able to keep all his mobs tightly packed in together, because it'd be such a pain to deal with, and you're having to go and hunt down each of them individually. Right now, they're going to be posturing to make sure that they're able to get that group stealth. Of course, they will be taking the avalanche pot first, and then you'll be seeing if they're... I'm not quite sure if they're going to be able... I believe I'm hearing the sound from the invisibility potion, so they usually use the avalanche potion first. That was the pound on the ground that you were hearing. Then the invisibility potion, then they jump off the ledge. This makes it so that they are able to not break through their stealth, which usually would be broken through that little bit of fall damage, and they're making sure they're having a clean transition and going into these last 2 trash packs.
Right, sure. Our SunSky now downing Glazer. He's sitting down for a little shut-eye in the meantime. Skyline now moving over to the final mobs, excuse me. Once they kill the both of these mobs, actually not the Brood Mother, once they kill the last spirit guarding the door will unlock, which is why they're opting to kill that one first. As soon as the door unlocks, the Resto Druid will sprint over to Cordana's platform, triggering the RP event to spawn the boss, while the DPS safely finish off the Brood Mother in the meantime. Now, unfortunately, with SunSky will need to use the tank death approach in order of pulling the jailer to the side, which is why we saw the tank death there. They res him on the other side, and they ride the elevator down in order to grab the light.
One of the interesting things when we're talking about comparing melee DPS together is we always talk about the extra utility, but the also extra, when you're focusing on the damage that they're going to be bringing into some scenarios. So when we're talking about, say, oh, will we bring a rogue, will we bring a Windwalker monk, the differences between, oh, well, this might be a little bit more niche, where we're saying, oh, we're only going to get the benefit from maybe this map and getting this skip. But Skyline D consistently throughout the regionals have done such an excellent job running these double rogues, incorporating it not only into their strategies, but also incorporating strategies around the rogues to best suit their strengths. We've seen so many times throughout these series pulling extra mobs, like you said, has been such a huge theme for them. Getting the extra Shuriken Storm damage into the eviscerates has been tremendous for them. But even when we saw that past seat, getting in multiple Shroud of Concealments in there just to be able to stealth in, stealth out certain trash packs, it's working so effectively for them.
Cordana now being pulled over for our Skyline D, while in the meantime SunSky still working to even open the door to have access. Now Cordana having 2 phases here. At 75% she will disappear and spawn an image of herself that will steal the light from the players, much like Shauna Paul, give me the light. Once you kill that mob, you will have to find Cordana using that light as she kind of throws glaives from a stealth position around the platform. Once she's exposed again, she will resume her phase 1 abilities, which do include these glaives, Jack, and of course the punt on the tank. But most importantly, the person with the light is responsible for cleaning up that kind of shaded, the void area on the ground that she drops, the shadowed area.
That's right. I love the, the references that you're kind of making to me, where it's always going to be the healer's job, or maybe it's just always going to be the priest's job there. I appreciate it.
I mean, look, the rest of the druids just picked up the light. I'm just saying.
He knows his place. That's right. So he does grab the light, and he is, of course, taking care of these void zones. It's very important to be able to get on top of these as rapidly as possible, because Skyline D, such a huge theme for them, rapidly are approaching the transition phase at 50% here, making sure they're cleaning up, sorry, 40%, making sure that they're actually just be able to constantly, clean up any of the goop on the ground before any of the copies of Cordana continue to go out. She must have some kind of identity crisis, having so many copies of herself.
I think so. Watch the Born Identity one too many times. Now, SunSky, unfortunately, getting full screened at the moment, which we do know what that means. That means we're quite confident that Skyline D's performance will lead to them winning this game. Now, it's not set in stone yet. She does enter her 40-second transition phase, where she will spawn 4 of these walls in succession. The players will, this is actually a really cool view. The players will be responsible for finding the gap, which you can identify in one of 2 ways. One is you can see the gap very briefly when the wall first spawns, as you saw on the bottom of the screen there, which gives players the time to react and get in position. The other one is you can re-expose the wall itself by carrying the light near it, so you can know where you need to go. Now, from the screen view that we have here, the bottom left statue is always the statue that the first ad in this next phase spawns at. While that ad is alive, Cordana is invulnerable. However, the ad can, of course, get stunned so that you have access to DPSing both of them.
That's right, and stuns aplenty this team does have. So again, they're getting the light into that corner there. That way they're going to be able to instantly drop in that quick Chaos Nova, make sure they're getting the stun off, get the cleave damage, which again, Skyline D is no stranger to. Watching out for the glaives here, because again, the melee area is quite saturated, so it's very, very important there. Great little pivot there by the Blood DK, making sure he's not going to be getting knocked off the edge. You really have to watch out for that big roundhouse kick that's coming out of Cordana, knocking you back and just dealing quite a bit of damage.
Edging is certainly not always the answer, as Cordana is currently getting chunked down for a significant portion of her health, and it looks like Skyline D is rearing up to be our top contender from the China region as they chisel away the remaining single percentages of Cordana's HP. She spawns a couple of extra walls, but absolutely no concern for them, and they will be taking these series a commanding 2-0.
Yep, Cordana may well be having an identity crisis, but Skyline D most certainly didn't drop a single map. But I do want to talk about SunSky as well, because they were, I mean, I don't want to bat an eye at these guys. They played a fantastic thing, and of course it does mean we'll have a Discipline Priest in that top 2 competing at the global finals.
Grinning ear to ear, Disc Priest at LAN. Sorry, yes?
Oh no, I was going to say, I do think that by the...